Hi there, my name's Ben Gibbs, and welcome to this first module of a new series of management microskills, which tips for becoming a better manager. In this module, we'll be looking at how to run more effective meetings. We'll look at how to prepare more effectively, how to lead the meeting more effectively, and how to turn the outcome of a meeting into outcomes in reality. We'll also look at how different sorts of meeting require different approaches and what to do when things don't go quite to plan. This short slide set provides you with a selection of material from the main guidance document, which you'll find in the platform. It also includes some additional material which lends itself to a more visual presentation. And this is flagged in the guidance, so you can return here if needed. I hope that you enjoy this resource and that you find it useful in your practice. We've all been to meetings where the organiser was anything but organised. Perhaps the meeting was called to make an important decision, but no one sent out the information needed so you could prepare in advance, meaning that you had to skim the data when you were there or just make it up on the hoof. Perhaps everything went out in advance, but the wrong people were there, or the person required to approve the decision wasn't there. Perhaps the intention was to brainstorm and come up with a new solution to something, but the usual suspects, maybe even you as the organiser, dominated the discussion whilst everyone else exchanged knowing glances or just zoned out. Maybe there were some great ideas tabled, but no one followed through afterwards. Or maybe the meeting should have been an email instead. When meetings are ineffective like this, they're not just a waste of time, but also of energy and goodwill, and people leave them feeling frustrated and drained. On the flip side, when meetings are effective, they can be extremely productive, motivating, and inspiring. In many types of organisation, including schools, meetings are often the only place where people come together to collaborate, communicate, solve problems, and plan projects. So the stakes are quite high, way too high just to wing it. We just need to have a quick conversation, we might say, or let's just pull a few people into the room. But this misses the opportunity to consider what we need to do to make the conversation effective. Good preparation, meeting management, and follow-up can make the difference between an engaging and enjoyable session and one in which everyone avoids eye contact and doodles. Ironically, this is particularly important if the need to meet is urgent. You may have little time to prepare, but you really need to if the meeting itself is to be effective. So pulling the meeting off for long enough to allow for good prep will pay off for you and your team will get things done, and you'll earn a reputation as an effective meeting leader as well. Though this resource is aimed at people finding their way in new team management roles, running meetings effectively is a skill that's critical all the way up to the top. Plenty of research has found that even top management teams of global companies can use their meeting time badly, focusing on things that should be dealt with elsewhere instead of business critical strategic issues. So, whether you're an executive leader looking to improve your meetings with a new team, or a new manager dipping your toe into this type of work for the first time, this module guide is for you. Now, your meeting is far more likely to be successful if you're clear on its purpose, on the agenda, and on who needs to be there, and if you take the time to get people and yourself ready to attend. The detail, time, and effort required in this prep will vary according to the need, of course. In fact, sometimes your preparation will lead you to conclude that you don't need a meeting after all. But the point is that running a meeting is a discipline, and if you take the time to run through the basics of good prep each time, it will become a habit, and you'll be rewarded with smooth sessions almost every time. Firstly, what you need to do is to think about why you're actually meeting. What's the purpose? Is it important enough to ask people to commit some of their time away from their other priorities? Now, this sounds trite, but it's a really important step. No one appreciates a meeting that could have been an email. Once you've decided that you do need to meet and have identified what needs to be accomplished, you'll need to set the agenda. And obviously, this involves coming up with a list of the steps that should be taken to achieve your aims, but you'll also need to think about sequencing, timings, and assigning items to particular people. This obviously requires some thought too about who needs to be there and therefore what sort of space is needed and what time is likely to work best for them. Without the right people, you're not going to accomplish your aim. They also need to be given roles to play as facilitator, scribe, or energizer, for example. And the guide goes into this in some detail. It also goes into what to do if you have a recurring meeting, because these need a specific approach, and in particular, a specific approach to the agenda. It's easy for these sessions to lose steam or to lack energy, but it's possible to overcome that with a bit of thought and creativity. Finally, your prep and finalising your prep involves the distribution of materials and ensuring that everything you need will be there in the room when you need it. And the guide provides you with a checklist to help with this. Now, all that prep is important, but even if you've completely nailed it, you can't just turn up and expect that things will go smoothly and that the agenda will take care of itself. And this is where the facilitation role comes in. The best meeting leaders play a number of different roles throughout the session, maintaining their authority whilst keeping people engaged and keeping the meeting on track. The meeting is being led from the moment people come into the room, so that the tone that's set is really important. Be clear, be focused, and be on time. If people are late, it's their responsibility to catch up. You might also want to use a specific way of checking in, getting people into the right frame of mind from the get-go. The ground rules are yours to set, of course, and unless you do, people will work on the basis of their own assumed terms. Being very specific about this, provided the terms that you set are appropriate, of course, to the purpose and the time constraints, is a good way of signalling your own authority and setting the style of the session. You also have to keep things on track, and this is primarily about staying focused on the agenda items and not getting distracted. But it's also about managing time, managing people's engagement, and managing challenges, including multitaskers, as they happen. And the guide, again, goes into this in some detail. Now, just as important as starting well is closing well. Don't labour it, but also don't end too abruptly as the clock strikes time, or perhaps worse, don't let things fizzle out. Make sure you have time at the end to round things off, review, and thank everybody. Something I see a lot in my work is leaders being too big, taking up too much space with their big brain or their big ego and crowding other people in meetings out. Now, meetings are a set piece opportunity for some leaders to do this, and it's your chance to do things differently. Following animation from Nowhere, an organisational consultancy I've done a bit of work with, and which focuses on better meetings, provides a useful way of thinking about this. So your meeting may have been a success, and it may have gone as well as planned, but it needs to count for something too, and that's why the follow-up after a meeting is of at least equal importance. Firstly, you should send a follow-up note to participants and to other key stakeholders, covering what decisions and outcomes resulted from the meeting, who has responsibility for the tasks that arose from the session, and when these will be done. Now, these aren't minutes, unless the meeting needs to have some kind of legal or statutory record. Aim for just a page, and then follow up to make sure that it was read and landed. And then finally, there's the review. This is where you get a chance to think about how it all went. And this is so rarely done, perhaps because meetings are seen as routine these days and as everyday, but it's a great way of improving your own practice, highlighting to others how much their time in meetings is valued. There are lots of good reasons to have a meeting, and the guidance above will serve you well in most cases. But some specific types of meeting benefit from slightly different approaches. And the guide provides you with some ideas for when your aim is to solve a problem or make a decision, for example, or when the session is online. Sometimes, despite doing everything in this guide and coming to your session with the very best of intentions, things will just go wrong. You're dealing with humans after all, and when you bring people together, like you have to for a meeting, it's little wonder that things can get derailed sometimes. As ever, though, it's best to manage, the best way to manage an issue as it arises is to have prepared for it in advance. Think about the people who are coming. Are there any with a reputation for causing difficulties? Any who are a bit introverted and less likely to engage? Any who are having issues away from work that are affecting their ability to focus? You can't predict everything, but you can try not to be blindsided by the things that you might already know. Now, the guide provides you with ideas for what to do when people are late or leave early, for example, when someone dominates the discussion or becomes disruptive, or when the group stalls or starts going round in circles, or even when it falls silent. It also provides with ideas for when a conflict boils over into open anger, and addresses the inevitability that people have brought concerns and politics and anxieties and so on into the room with them, and that sometimes the elephant needs to be faced and discussed before the real work can be done. As a meeting leader, you have a responsibility to keep things on track and to avoid wasting people's time on an ineffective or a disruptive meeting. So be prepared for curveballs, but stay calm and remind yourself and your team that the goal is to have a productive and an enjoyable session, and to achieve your intended outcomes. Meeting well is a skill, or as the consultancy that I mentioned before call it, it's a craft. And I'll close with another animation from them, which outlines what they mean by meeting craft, and why we've put this resource together for you. All the very best.